Hey there, and welcome to Women Built Right, the show with a mission to empower women and make construction easier to understand. I'm your host, Sunny Roten, and with my co-host, Ashley Berg, we'll explore different topics on building and construction. Each week, we'll sit down with incredible women who are paving the way and sharing their stories as they build careers and break barriers in today's world. Whether you're a longtime fan or a first-time listener, you're in for an exciting ride, diving deep into the mystical world of construction and supporting women along the way. So sit back, grab your coffee, and put on your hard hat as we break it all down. Let's get started. Hello, and welcome to Women Built Right, the show with a mission to empower women and make construction more accessible. I'm your host, Sunny Roten, here with co-host Ashley Berg. In today's episode, we're going to discuss the ins and outs of choosing land for construction. Towards the end of the episode, we will also introduce our next Woman Built Right, Kate Ryder, a pilot and mom of two boys. Be sure to listen all the way through for her story. All right, so let's dive into our topic. So choosing land, you need to do your due diligence. So this is one of the most important parts of construction, because if you end up with land that you can't build what you want to build on, then you just wasted a bunch of money. So the first thing I would say is if you are going to be looking for land, whether you know the area or not, you need to have a realtor, because that realtor is there to help you figure out what all you're going to be needing, negotiating if there's anything that comes up, and kind of walking you through the process.
Can you use, in our last episode, we talked about having a lender.
Yes.
I know some lenders have preferred realtors.
Right.
Is that a good idea, or should you also look like in different directions for different realtors, like interview them to make sure they're...
I would look at different realtors.
Okay.
Try to find one that has experience looking for land. Because if they don't know what due diligence is needed, they're not going to be much help.
Okay.
So you want somebody that's experienced with finding land and knowing what to do while you're looking for it.
Okay.
One of the first things you need to do is to get a survey. And the reason for that is you want to make sure that you know what your true property lines are, that your neighbor's property, like if they have a shed or a fence or something, that it's not coming over onto your property. There's no easements. So an easement is where somebody could have authority to do something basically on your land. So
like a storm drain or
well, those are like
city.
Utility easements.
Yeah.
So the city could have a utility easement on a property where they could come put in, power lines or something like that through your property. But then also your neighbors could have an easement where they could have an easement that maybe they're landlocked, right? And they're surrounded by all these different properties and they're not up against a road. And so they need an easement through a property to put their driveway. And so that's a good thing to look at is there an easement there for somebody else? And if there is, what are they allowed to do? Where is it on your land? And all that stuff. And then another thing is, and the realtor should help you with this, doing a title land search. And so that'll basically tell you, does the person selling the land have authority to sell the land? Do they truly own it? Does anybody own it with them? If so, is everybody giving permission? And then another thing is, are there any current liens on the property? So, somebody could have, came and cleared the land at one point and that property owner didn't pay them. And so the clearing company came and put a lien on the property and legally it's not, allowed to sell.
Until the lien's taken care of, right?
Right, yes. So,
and is it a monetary lien most of the time?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, so somebody has to pay that lien off in order for that person to own the land free and clear. And then another thing you need to do is obviously make sure if it's in your budget. So you need to take in consideration, if your overall budget is $1 million and you know that the house you want to build is probably going to be around $800,000, then that leaves you $200,000 for land. But that's not just purchasing land. That's also developing the land, which is a huge thing. So how much is it going to cost to clear it? We'll get into
and putting in electricity lines and things like that. Okay.
Yeah. And then, so what are the added costs? Are there utilities on the property? How much is going to be need to clear? Do you need to bring dirt in? Things like that. Just thinking of the overall cost of building the house, buying the land, and developing the land. So I usually when I'm talking to somebody that's looking for land, I'll direct them that a really simple thing to do when you're looking at a property on Zillow or wherever, your realtor sends you a property and you want to kind of do a simple search where you go there to see if it's even going to work, is to look at a GIS map. And so have you guys ever heard of this?
Yes.
Okay.
No.
Tell
how you find out what all your neighbors' names are.
Yes.
When you forget.
Wow.
The easiest thing to do is you go on Google, type in GIS map, and then what your county is. And then in that GIS map, you can put in the address for the property, and it'll have something called layers or tools. The layers, you can click what you want to see. So basically, it's layers on a map.
Oh, okay.
So you can click something, it's called zoning, which is important. So you can see what's the zoning ordinance for that piece of land. Is it agricultural? Is it residential? Is it industrial?
Oh.
What you're allowed to build and what you can do on your land. So even though you may find a piece of land and you're like, okay, it's zoned residential, so I can build a home, but you want a homestead and you want to have farm animals. Well, if it's not zoned agricultural, whatever the county is requiring, then you can't do that. You
Can it be zoned for different, like, can it be a residential and agriculture?
No.
It has
One
to be
zone.
one zone.
One zone. Yes.
So in order to do a homestead,
Yeah.
because I know you're interested in that, you would have to look for land that is just agriculture.
Yeah. Well,
Or can you go to the city to get it changed?
Yeah. So we'll talk about that in a second.
Okay.
But yeah. So well, actually, we can talk about it now. Let's just say, I guess the best way to say it is find on the GIS map what the zone is,
Mhm.
and then you need to look up what the zoning regulations are. You can get that from the county and say, hey, I'm interested in this property. I need to know what's allowed on there. I see it's zoned for agricultural. Can you send me the zoning regulations? Or you could Google it and find it yourself. And you really need to dive into that. Or if you have a realtor that is familiar with it, maybe your builder could help you, because it's not just agricultural. Like there's
Okay.
a lot of
Now, if it's zoned for agricultural, can you build a home on
Yes.
that? Okay. So that's kind of the encompassing part where
Yeah.
you can build a home but also have agriculture.
Right. Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
That makes more sense to me.
and then there's something called future zoning, which is what Kate was talking about. So I was just looking at a piece of land with a potential client actually 2 days ago, and he sent me the address. We looked it up on GIS, and I said, okay, that piece of land and the land around it is zoned agricultural. He wants to homestead. And then I said, let's click on future zoning to see what it says. And we did, and it was the future land zone was industrial, which means
Oh, wow. So there's
Right.
going to be big buildings
Right.
going up in the future.
in the future. So the city is planning on rezoning the area around him to industrial, which is going to tank his property value, because nobody's going to want a little homestead with
And no one would want a
warehouses.
homestead with a bunch of buildings
Right.
around them, too. I mean,
Yeah. So
tit for tat.
yeah. And then another thing to look at for the layers is flood zones. Obviously, you want to know what flood zone you're in, for insurance purposes. And then also, is your house going to flood? Contours is a good one to do. So there's a button you can click and it shows you the contours on your lot, usually by like 2 feet or 10 feet, and how it steps down. And you can see how steep of a slope the lot has, which is nice to know what kind of foundation that you can put there, or where you want to put your house in the middle of the lot. Maybe it contours and it's like a giant hole. And then okay, well, it's in a hole. Basically, I'm going to have to
Build it up.
put a bunch of dirt there. And that's
Okay.
going to cost money. Yeah. So that and wetlands is another one to look at. Same guy that we were talking to a couple days ago that wants to build a homestead. He found that lot. And on the lot on the back is a creek. And
Okay.
we clicked on the wetlands button. And there was wetlands on the back, which meant that he couldn't clear or build
Oh,
in that area,
oh wow.
which the GIS is not super accurate. You really need a surveyor to go out there and tell you exactly where the wetlands are, where the property lines and all this stuff. But I'm just saying to do some due diligence yourself and kind of look
Yeah.
into it first before you put money down and start that whole process.
Yeah.
Those are good things to look at, and make sure you're not building on wetlands, because you can't. One other thing to check for with the property is utilities, which you kind of brought up earlier.
Okay.
So you'll want to check into, does your lot have access to city water and sewer? Does it have access to electric? Does it have gas if you're wanting like gas appliances or a gas fireplace, and internet as well? If you don't have city water and sewer, probably going to end up with septic or well, which are added costs. And then if you're going to do a septic, you probably need to do a soil perk test to make sure that the soil is draining for septic, because
Wow.
if it's not, then you got a problem, because you can't put drain field where
Yeah.
it's not perking.
Ooh.
Lots of things to think about. And then electric, obviously, you need electric to come to your lot,
Mhm.
or you're going to be living off the grid with solar, which Some people are
Demand. If you're going homestead, you might as well, right?
Yeah. And then gas is not a huge one, but it's good to know because a lot of people are, they don't want a propane tank on the side of their house. And so they're like, oh, I want natural gas. Well, if there's not natural gas there, you're going to end up with a propane tank. You can either, get one buried or above ground, or you don't have gas. So all things to think about with
Can
that.
you have utilities? Like, can you get with the city to have city water
Yes.
and electricity? Okay.
Yep. So
But that's probably
very expensive.
a whole nother podcast episode.
I mean, it's simple. You can go to the city and say, here's the lot, where's the closest that, the city water and sewer is. If there's some in the area. And we had a client a few years ago where the city water was 3 lots away from him. And he cared that much about not having a well. He didn't want a well. He really wanted city water. That he paid for the city to bring that water line to his property so that he could connect to it.
Oh, wow.
So you have options. It's just,
Yeah.
this is why I'm saying you need a realtor, because it's a lot to think about for yourself and
sure.
who you need to talk to and what steps you need to take and all that stuff. And not only is it the lot size, but what are your setbacks? Because every lot's different. Depending on the county, what their setbacks are. You could have a 5-foot setback. You could have 20. You could have 35. There's all different types of things. And that really decreases what your building area is on your lot. So you could have this
Massive piece of
well,
land.
you could have this lot and you're like, oh, that's perfect. That's 100 feet wide. And the house I want to build is 90 feet wide.
Yeah.
But once you have those setbacks, maybe it's only 80 foot wide of building restriction, and you can't fit it there, as well as impervious surface limitations, which is not a lot of people hear about. If you're from Florida, you're from Jacksonville, the beaches are big on this because all of those lots are so tiny and close together. Like Atlantic Beach has impervious surface limitations. Jax Beach does, but you'll have to check your county. So basically, it's saying if your lot, let's just say, for example, if your lot is 5,000 square feet and only 50% of your lot can be taken up by impervious surface, then the other 50% cannot be covered because they need water to be able to drain through it so that there's not a bunch of surface water flooding out the roads and streets and stuff like that.
Wow.
So, you would have to look at the county, what their impervious surface limitations are, if there are any, and then how much are you allowed to take up on your lot. So soil testing, I always tell people to get soil tests when they're finding land, because not only are you testing the soil to make sure it's suitable for your foundation to build on, but also is it going to perk for a septic if you need a septic, which we talked about earlier.
Yeah.
Last thing I would say is check for covenants. So if you're going to end up in a lot that's in a neighborhood, does that neighborhood have covenants? And then what are they restricting you to?
Deed restricted or anything?
Some have their own setbacks outside of the county that restrict it even more. Some people or some neighborhoods say, you can't have chickens and, you can't.
But you can't do short-term rentals.
Right, yes.
Oh,
So
like that. Yeah.
it's a big thing to check for is if there's covenants on it. All right, so let's move into our segment about our next Woman Built Right. Our guest today is Kate Ryder. She's a commercial airline pilot in Jacksonville, Florida. Right? Am I saying that right?
Yes.
Okay. So, hey, Kate, thanks for joining us. Can you please tell us a little bit about you?
Oh, my goodness. Well, I am an airline pilot now. This year will be my 20th year as an airline pilot, and was a flight instructor before then, married to another airline pilot. Then he and I have 2 boys, high schooler and an elementary schooler. So we have a very busy life.
Yes.
But lots of color coding on the calendar in order to make it all work.
Yeah. I know you mentioned before when we were talking that your son has his own podcast.
Oh my goodness. Well, they've each kid went through that phase of the like, hey guys, check us out. I think the older one did a lot of like dirt biking and whatnot over in Atlantic Beach with some friends. And then this one, I don't even know it. I think it's what's Fortnite? The videos of like people playing video games.
Yes.
And
Do
so
you
that's
remember
what he's doing?
Do you remember his channel name?
Pro Dragon 26.
All right. So if you're listening and you want to watch Pro Dragon.
which used to be my channel. But
Pro Dragon.
took it and renamed it.
Okay.
26?
Pro Dragon
Yeah.
26.
26.
That's
Okay.
I think that's his favorite number.
Okay. Cool. So why did you want to become a pilot?
Well, I actually didn't initially. It wasn't even something that it wasn't that I didn't want to. It was not even something that was on my mind. That's just, of course, we're talking a bit ago, but I don't know. It was nothing, we'd never done electrical stuff or engine stuff or whatever. I don't know. It was just, I was planning on and did end up going to nursing school.
Oh,
I had a family friend take me on one little flight when I think I was a senior in high school, but that was kind of it. It was like a little blip, and that was it. I did 2.5 years of nursing school before I figured out I didn't want to be a nurse.
Right.
I didn't like being inside all the time, although schedule-wise, it's kind of funny on the back end now. It's very similar where you do work for a more extended period of time, and then you have more days off that are grouped together.
okay.
But it just... I got to a point I was like, this is not what I'm supposed to do. I don't know what I'm going to do. But I got out of nursing. I switched degrees and was like, well, what do I enjoy? And being outside. So I actually have a degree in anthropology
Okay.
and fascination with archaeology and, of course, Indiana Jones. That was very big when I was young. And my brother actually was in college and overheard a lady talking to her professor or his professor. And she was a pilot and was getting ready to leave for a job down in Florida. And he just happened to mention like, hey, my sister took a flight. She was kind of interested. And to back this up a bit, in between being nursing and anthropology, my parents actually had me go to a counseling place where they tested me on what my aptitude would be for a job wise.
Yeah.
And I remember like there was this wall of pamphlets and I remember pulling out the pilot one. They were like, no, dear, that's not for you. I put it back and it spits out the results and it was, oh, you're caring and empathetic and you should be in the medical field.
Yeah.
And I'm like, but not.
Yeah.
So back forward to my brother talking, and he was like, "Oh, my sister was kind of interested, and she put me in touch with one of her students who is now an instructor, and was like, this guy is great. He will be able to tell you kind of how this career can be a thing, and like the rest was history. I mean, it just was like such a happenstance of this one meeting. If my brother had been like 10 minutes later, I don't know.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know. It was just not a thing that.
Yeah.
People talk to you about being able to do, but also when you ask about it, not even encouraged to do.
Right. Yes. Yeah.
So-
I get that. I feel like
Yeah.
a lot of life happens that way is you just kind of stumble into
Yeah.
things that you weren't even thinking about. How old were you when you decided to pursue piloting?
That was 21.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And you're like
And I-
25 now, so not that long.
Thank you for that.
Yeah. And then what was the process like? Like, how long did it take you to achieve it?
So, because there's so many different paths to get to where I am now, but since I was already more than halfway through college, what this instructor encouraged me to do was go to a school where you're just doing it on the side, and basically full time. And this is how I ended up here in Jacksonville. Was I took off a fall semester of college, came here, did straight 90 days of all of my training. It was all day, every day. That's all you did. You were studying, flying, studying. Wow. And although it was interrupted a little bit by 9/11, this is 2001. So it actually took a little bit longer than it was supposed to. But I got all of my ratings and then, which basically gave me a flight instructor rating at the end. And typically, there's two ways. There's military or there's general aviation, GA, we call it. And a lot of the way that people who are in general aviation build their flight time is to get paid to do it as a flight instructor. And so that's why you typically get this license. And so then I went back to college, of course, because 9/11 had happened. Finished college while I was flight instructing on the side, and then pursued a more full-time flight instructing job before I was able to get back to the airlines, which was all put on hold.
So once you
For a couple of
finished
years.
your training, how long did it take until you were
So
commercial?
I finished my ratings. Well, I was rated as a commercial pilot and a flight instructor pilot.
Okay.
By December of 2001, and I got hired at my first airline job in May of 2004.
Okay.
which is why I'm coming up on my 20 years. So
Yeah.
So it took a while. I mean, 9/11 put the brakes on pretty much everything, but especially the aviation industry.
Were you worried about it after 9/11?
Not for safety reasons like that. It just was, like, oh, well, I just picked a career that just got shut down.
Right.
How wise was that? Like, I just left nursing and now, this career has just come to a grinding halt. But they say with flying, like once it gets in your blood, like you just can't stop. Like you either you love it or you hate it. And there's not really a in between.
Okay.
Wow.
So what's it like now that you're doing it and compared to like what you thought it would be?
I don't, it's like, I can't even imagine. And I talk about this. So, the flight school where I did most of my training is just down the road, Craig Airport. And, I still see, I can tell the engine when one of the planes is going to come over. I'm like, oh, I know what, that was right before I came over here. I was like, oh, there's a Seminole flying right now. And, it just has the two engines have this special sound. And I was driving by last week with my husband. And I'm like, I can't even remember life before like this life.
Right.
Yeah. It just has become, it's such a unique way of life. We know lots of people who are pilots, some who are couples like us, but then we have, as we have had kids and really kind of, rooted into the community here in Jacksonville, we have made more friends who we call normal friends. But the normal job, I'm like, oh, wait, I can't call them. They have a normal job or they, whatever, normal schedule. And so, and I've told people before, if I ever lost my medical and I couldn't fly anymore, maybe I would go back into medical just because now, number one, I know how to study. Flying taught me really well how to study. But also, it's such a different rhythm of life that is so, we're just so used to it. I don't know. I can't imagine.
Yeah.
And then as a mom, of course, like going away and having a quiet hotel room to myself without kids, like banging on the bathroom door. I don't know. I just can't imagine not doing it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Man. A night away with no kids banging on the door.
Or I just did 4 nights away without kids this week. So
my goal this year is to take up flight training.
There you go.
So what are some of the challenges you face as a woman pilot?
So it's kind of two different ways. Number one, just being a woman, from the very beginning, oh, that's not for you, to people not wanting to have you as your instructor, to people not wanting to hire you because it would make the other pilots' wives feel jealous, or to,
that one didn't even cross my mind.
People getting, off the flight. Now
people got off the flight.
Yeah, like I've had people at the flight school and then they just were like, no, I'm not doing it, and just walk out the door.
Wow.
And then, even now, so when I go on a trip, it's usually a 3 or 4 day trip. And at least once a flight, I'll do somewhere between 1 to 4 flights a day. And every single flight, at least, one comment is made of like, there's a lot of positives. Fist bumps from some people. And then there's the guys who like walk into the wall because their mouths are just like, because to you, we say goodbye as they're getting off and they walk towards you and get off and they forget to turn and like run into doors. So, you get a lot of comments, and then within your peers too of, oh, you just got here because, you're a woman, or you get called a girl a lot. I'm like, I'm not a girl. Like, it just, you grow a thicker skin. You learn to pick your battles. I fly with a lot of, I'm pretty senior on what I fly. And so I fly with a lot of senior captains who are heading towards retirement. I'm like, I'm not going to change their mind. I can not engage in whatever they might be talking about that I'm not comfortable, but in that kind of banter or putting people down or whatever, like I'm not going to change their mind. It's not even worth it.
Yeah.
As long as it's not going to cause a safety issue of us being able to work together, I've got thick skin. Other challenge is being a mom.
Yeah.
So, I was really lucky to get in as soon as I could right after 9/11. And so my kids were pretty young during this the hard years, I would call it, and they come and they go. We just dealt with COVID, which was another hard year of me being gone a lot, which is not typical. But my goal was to get as senior as I could on an airplane where I am now, where I have control of my schedule a lot more. So I drop a lot of my schedule. I'm able to do that and be home.
Okay.
Most of the time. And then, I just fly because it's fun and I enjoy it. But I think it's better that I was gone. I mean, I there's never a time you want to miss your kid's life or whatever. But I think when they were young, they don't remember me being as gone as much as I was. But now they really know I'm around a lot.
So you can choose your own schedule?
So you in the airlines, we bid monthly for our schedule and it's all based on seniority. Okay. So I have pretty good seniority. I pretty much pick the trips that I want based on what they say. You have to build a schedule that is this many hours. Okay. And then we have two options and every airline is different. We all operate under different contracts, but basically you can get rid of your trips two ways. Either you have enough reserve coverage, and reserves are the pilots who are on call, and they basically just get a schedule of being on call. They don't actually have trips. Okay. So if something cancels and pilots are stuck somewhere else or whatever, call in sick, they're the ones who fill in for it. But if you have a plethora of them on a certain day, then they will let you drop trips because we have coverage. The other option is just to advertise your trips. So I actually just saw on the way here, I'm like, oh, one of my February trips just got picked up. That's great. I didn't want to fly that one. That was a 4-day and it wasn't the best trip. So in those different ways, it all boils down to seniority.
Okay.
The more senior you are on an airplane in your seat, the more control that you have over your life. And so I've always chosen quality of life over chasing the money, which would be, upgrading right away to a captain or getting on the big airplane, because then I would be junior again on those things and lose that control.
Yeah. Okay. So there's different types of pilots. You kind of touched on this earlier. You said military or general
aviation. Yeah. So there's those two main categories as far as like how pilots will typically get their license.
Okay.
Obviously military pays for you to do this, and it has always been very small on women. Definitely growing, as I don't know if y'all saw Miss America.
Yeah, Miss America.
I already love it. Yeah. So she's I don't know if it's Air Force, but that's awesome for her.
Miss Colorado.
It's Navy, I think, right?
I don't know what it was.
Navy.
I just saw the bleep on our on this female Facebook page that I'm with, and or the general aviation. And so within general aviation, then there's a huge plethora. So there's airline pilots, there's flight instructors, there's charter and corporate, there's cargo pilots. It's just
and you never really think about how many different
so many avenues that you can go.
Okay,
but yeah.
And so as somebody's going to start off in this career, I know it's kind of a hard question. What's like average expected pay starting out?
Oh my gosh. So it is so different than when I got hired, we were like food stamp poor.
Oh,
it was bad. I think I made, as an airline pilot, like $21,000 my first year.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So speaking of real estate, we were up in New Jersey at the time, and my husband, so we have our combined to $21,000 paychecks, and they were like, per month, right? And we're like, no. And they were like, you need to go to a different state and buy a house. And that's how we ended up back in Florida.
Okay.
It is much better now. And I think a lot has to do with, with this movement away from the military going into the airlines, and a lot more general aviation has brought a lot more younger generations into it. And with that came all the technologies and the online presence of chat rooms and all of that. And so the discussion, I think, of pay was like, it wasn't a secret. Like, why would I choose a career where it's so bad and I'm going to be poor for so long? And so the leaps and bounds that the pay has come since then. Now there's like these bonuses, $100,000 sign-on bonus as long as you will work for us for a couple years before you move on. So typically you have, in the airline world, you will go to a regional airline, which is one of the smaller commuter jets, the 50 or the 70 or 90 seat jets, and do your time there. And then usually you build turbine time is what we call it before then you can go to the major airlines. And so that attempt to keep them there before they move on a little longer. So, I think people are starting off now and I'm really bad with this, like maybe 80, 100, not even including the sign-on bonus. A lot better than $21,000.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, you can actually afford to live now.
You can afford to live now. Yeah, so it's gotten a lot better. Absolutely.
How
Across
do
the
you
board.
and your husband work out schedules as far as someone being home?
Again, it just has to do with seniority.
Okay.
That was it. I mean, we couldn't have done it earlier. We did it with my parents helping us out big time. And, we even moved a couple times to make that all work out. And they've settled down here in Jacksonville with us when our second kid was born.
Okay.
But then, as I gained my seniority and the kids got older and more self-sufficient, like tonight when they're at home by themselves.
Yes.
I'm sure they're eating their vegetables that I left out. It just became where, I can control like, hey, I bid Monday through Fridays, even if my husband probably might have to do something on that. I know I'm senior enough that I can drop that. Weekends tend to be harder to drop. When I was talking about like coverage before, they will raise the minimum of what that coverage is. So sometimes it might be harder to drop on a weekend. And again, it just it boils down to seniority of being able to control it. So
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's really
Do you
interesting.
have any advice for other women that might want to get into piloting?
It is. So we are, we're still small. I mean, we're 5%.
Oh, wow.
5%.
That's really small.
It's really small. So
I was just thinking about that. Like, I was like, I don't remember if I've ever been on a plane.
And it's so funny because for me, I'm like, every plane is with a pilot. Like, it's just something that doesn't even cross my mind. And I've got girlfriends who are pilots and, we all talk. And so to me, it's so interesting to hear people say that because that's my life. And but that's what it comes down to. My advice is find mentors, find your community of women pilots. There's resources everywhere. In basically most communities, you have two huge groups, the 99s, and then you have Women in Aviation International. And so they usually do monthly meetings, such like that. So that's a great way to find like local community. And then now online too, there's so many,
Facebook groups.
Facebook groups. I know the main big one, and it's been really amazing to watch this develop over the years, started by a couple ladies, airline pilots, is called Female Aviators Sticking Together, or FAST.
Oh,
But you do have to have your private license to be a part of that group.
Okay.
I think the spinoff of that was called Lady Aviators, and those can be, and I might be wrong, but I think those can be student pilots.
Okay.
But those, and men and women, there's crazies on both sides. So you really, you want to find some trusted mentors too, not just the group at large, because you will hear the full gamut of advice.
Yeah.
And a lot of times you don't know the background of where they sit professionally.
Right.
So, it just find a community, find a mentor or two.
Okay.
Is my advice.
Okay.
Getting started.
I like that.
Do you have anything you want to add or ask or?
No, I never thought
That was it.
it was such a small community
No, it's
of
so-
pilots like that.
So small, and it's smaller within the airlines than so they will say like, oh, this many pilots, you might see stats on have their basic license or at least a commercial license or whatever, but actually at the airlines it's still really small. So
You always see the pilots after their flights and they come out, they got their little tiny suitcase and they're gone for this many days, and it's like, how do you stuff all that stuff in there? I'm really trying to think back of all the flights that I did, and I don't think I've ever seen a woman.
Yeah.
To be honest,
like my bag is just as small, and it's so funny. Like,
but you could probably fit more in there.
And that's the thing, is like when everything has its place. Because every time I go to a hotel room, it all goes to the same place out and same place in. I could reach blindly into my bag and probably find anything that's in there. Like I always have in my second case, I have makeup that stays in my bag and makeup at home, and hairbrushes in my bag.